the New Zealand Government to offer a formal and unreserved apology to Pacific communities for the discriminatory implementation of the immigration laws of the 1970s that led to the events of the Dawn Raids.
Post-war New Zealand was considered to be the land of milk and honey. Pacific Islanders were encouraged to come to New Zealand to help fill the labour shortage.
Back then they wanted a lot of our labour from the islands because a lot of people who didn't want to do those jobs, mainly in the factories, and so my dad came in the early 70s. And then he brought us over from the islands for better education and better lifestyle and more, opportunities for their kids here.
So education was really, really important to them, and it's not exactly so that you get good jobs at the end of it, it's so you become a good Samoan and to meet your roles and obligations as a daughter or a son to a parent and family.
But for some Pacific Islanders, the land of milk and honey was about to turn sour, and their dream of a better life would become a nightmare.
We had all these hiding places in the flat we lived in. We had exit plans.
Your phone would go 3 rings stop, so that meant, okay, immigration on the way.
I thought a lot of them considered me as a traitor. I didn't belong to them, that I was a white Samoan.
Many Pacific people lived in the inner city working in factories and pursuing better education. But often these communities faced issues that migrants from European countries didn't have to face.
One time I was a mother of 3 kids, working full-time, doing part-time university, finishing my MA degree off, just happened to glance at this car that had driven past, and a skinhead puts his head out and says, "What are you staring at, you black bitch?"
One guy was a good friend to, he was a wrestler, Samoan wrestler. And he was walking up the Kloopat. Kloopat was a pub in Ponsonby Road, right near, not far from the police station I used to work. As he walked up the stairs to the top of the bar, he sort of miscalculated the steps and he almost slipped, and then he swore, the F word, and then there was a cop 2 steps down and he grabbed him and locked him up for swearing in a public place. So little offences like that, and you get arrested and get a police record, which I thought was rather dumb and stupid.
In the early 1970s, there was an economic downturn, and with unemployment rising, Pacific Islanders found that they were no longer wanted. Immigration policies that had been ignored were now being policed.
Politically, it was Rob Muldoon's wish to get back into Parliament, and he was using Pacific Islanders, saying that we're overstayers and all the rest of that stereotyping, that we were bad. we were the ones stealing people's jobs, etc., etc., like that kind of attitude, and putting it out through the media and succeeding.
And we've got to control our immigration. We can't let a flood come here and swamp us and swamp our economy.
During the 75 elections, they got the biggest majority ever, still. It's a record. And he used racism, racist attitude, scaremongering.
When the National Party came into power, there was a crackdown on immigration, and overstayers lived in fear of deportation.
I was only a small child when we came. I was about 3 going on 4. I do remember going from place to place, but not really knowing why we have to keep moving.
Police and immigration officers would carry out dawn raids to catch illegal immigrants.
We would have signals that I didn't know, but my mum and dad already had these, because we had uncles staying with us as well. And they were all overstayers. So mum would tell us a story, oh, we have to go because dad's got something to do, load up into the car and take off. At a moment's notice, so everything was ready to go, ready to rock and roll, We had all these hiding places in the flat we lived in. We had exit plans, all of that, all mapped out. They already knew what to do. And there was one night where the signal was made and we all loaded up into our Cortina because we heard the flat up the road getting raided. So we all loaded up in a Ford Cortina and then made our...
Pacific Islanders made up 1/3 of all overstayers, but over 2/3 of those prosecuted were Pacific Islanders.
Governments used to just turn a blind eye to overstayers. That's why they let so many UK people overstay. But what I never understood is, so why did they turn on the Pacific Islanders, and not everybody else? So that points to an obvious thing around race to me. And that's the sad part of the dawn raids, is it was racial targeting.
During the 70s, there was a wave of young people who began to stand up to question authority, including a group of Pacific Islanders known as the Polynesian Panthers.
It was a time of revolution.
And for us to tell them that we've got to change and that what they're doing isn't right, one of the strategies that we came up with was to go and dawn raid the politicians while they were asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning. We didn't have cars then, we were only 16, 17, 18, broke as and stuff, but it was our supporters and our friends who had the vehicles. We used loud hailers and spotlights. Come out now with your passports, Bill Birch, and prove to us that we did that. And as soon as the lights and that come on, we'd jump in the cars and take off. But we wanted to let them know what it felt like to be dawn raided. Yeah.
The dawn raids continued on, but then the government introduced a new policy that would become even more controversial.
When a Swiss message at the time, it was like a fax thing from Wellington headquarters to say that you are to form a squad, go to the places where most Polynesian people with brown skin congregate, question them and ask for their identity as to their eligibility to stay in New Zealand. We parked the van and questioned people as to their identity and their status in New Zealand. It was pretty bad.
Stops became so loud that the government was forced to change their immigration policies.
An amazing teacher there who used to bring over boys from Tonga to do their school C 1 year. And because I taught woodwork, most of them ended up in my woodwork class. And so the immigration come in and they're going, we're looking for this person. But fortunately we had a couple of Tongan women in the office and they would go, oh, they're over in woodwork. And then your phone would go, 3 rings, stop. So that meant, okay, immigration on the way. Those 3 rings go, you yell out once and then you switch the switch on the wall and all the machines stop. So everybody knows when the machines all stop that something's happening. And then some people would disappear under benches. It sounds so bizarre now. It actually was a normal thing. Seddon had been built on a dump, and the dump was subsiding, was going down, 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 down. So these huge gaps were opening underneath the classrooms. So we found that that was a place where you could go safely and hide if you needed to. It wasn't a big fanfare, it was just how you lived with a difficult world.
After I'd written the book Dawn Raids, I kind of wanted at the launch to have more people know about it, so I wrote that for children, but I wanted more adults to know about it as well. So we put together an exhibition where you walk into sort of a page of the book, so into a 70s lounge room of a Pacific family with all the pictures on the wall and the beads around the photos, and takes you from that lovely safe setting and into the reality of what happened at that era. The Panthers and I have spent quite a bit of time travelling around talking to high school students, primary students, and they are hungry for New Zealand knowledge and New Zealand history.
There are many lessons that can be learnt from the Dawn Raid, and the spirit of the Polynesian Panthers lives on in a new generation of Pacific Islanders.
I feel like our Pacific generation now is so about social justice. It's all about implementing change for good, eradicating racism in Aotearoa. It's really important for Pacifica in this generation to heal the trauma that happened to our older generation so that it never happens again.
For some people, and bled out across generations.
I call myself a son of the Dawn Raids, because at the end of the day it happened. We don't want to go back to those days, and there are important lessons to learn from our history. New Zealanders shouldn't be ashamed of it because it's history, it's what happened, but we should learn from it. And so it's the same with those that went through it. Us Pacific people shouldn't be ashamed of it because it's something that we went through. It was a means to an end, so sure they broke the law to stay here illegally, but they didn't commit a crime in my view. They didn't murder anyone or steal anything. In fact, they came here and contributed. It was a reverse crime in my view, but hey, I'm just